All right, class. So, as we talked about on Monday with Shakespeare and then yesterday with Hemingway, we talked specifically about the dialogue within their papers, within their plays. We talked about those, the differences that they have together, but also the significance that each of them had and each of them used in their format. So with Shakespeare, we talked about with his plays specifically, he had to be very careful with his word choice, the words that he chose to use, how that projected the mood that he was wanting audiences and also his actors to encompass. So he was very specific. He very rarely used the words like mad, sad, happy. He used very specific words, right? Anguished, abandoned, disillusioned, joyful, joyous, excited, right? He used his words to create the mood, okay? He also used specific ways in the way he wrote, right? He was careful in elongating his sentences using dashes and commas and ellipses to create a movement of excitement or frustration or anger, an impassioned moment of speaking, or he used very short staccato sentences. So he was very clever in the way that he projected his dialogue in his plays, and that allowed him to create this great movement because he didn't have that internal dialogue. It was sidewise, right? Like you had, oh, in this scene this is happening, and oh, this is what's happening. But otherwise, he had to project everything he wanted that in that frame of mind, in the way they spoke, okay? In complete opposition to that, yesterday we looked at Ernest Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants, and in his piece, he also was specific on his word choice, but more importantly, he had that internal dialogue. He had that narrative behind in that story, which allowed him to give the readers a reference point for what was happening. But the dialogue that he used, he was very careful with, right? He allowed for these very short sentences. And instead of them promoting this like fast-paced quickness, that oftentimes you'll get that in that staccato sentence, instead, he made it as though it was because they were short with each other. These characters weren't quite connecting with each other, okay? There's these long, pregnant pauses. There were these sighs in his dialogue that he used, okay? And so we have those 2 points of references that I've given to you for your dialogue papers that you guys are going to be working on. This is super important because you're going to be getting specific moods from me, and I can almost guarantee you they're not going to be these ones on the board. These are just small. It's like 18 words that I have for you. I have different ones that I'm going to be using, but the point and the goal of this assignment is for you guys to utilize your word choice, to utilize your phrasing, to look at these 2 examples of dialogues that you have and how you can incorporate those into your own writing to create this mood, okay? I want you to, today in our activity, we're going to go ahead and group you in groups of 4. Kind of looks like we might have a group of 3 here. But you guys are going to be groups of 4, and you guys are going to come together. What I want you to do is I want you to take these particular moods, and I want you to write a couple of dialogue sentences to each other to create these moods. How would you do it without necessarily using these words, right? Sarcastic, relatively easy for you guys. Playful, maybe not as easy. That's a fun one. Judgmental. We've got abandoned, despair. Those are some of the words I want you to look at. I want you to create those sentences. And then I want you to be able to use those in your paper so you have a better understanding of how you'll do that in your paper. Now remember, it's just a 1-page paper that we're doing, okay? So 2 characters, limit yourself, all right? Maybe 3, but be very careful with taking too many more, otherwise it's gonna get quite muddled. Also have a couple of things up there for you guys to avoid, so I want you to take those down in your notes before you leave because those are things that I don't want to see in your dialogue papers on Friday, all right? All right, go ahead and grab yourself into your groups and work on this, and then we'll come back together at the end.